morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Congregation of Westchester on our online worship service. My name is Kathy Beatty, and I'm a lay leader in this congregation. Our minister, Reverend Dan Schatz, is on leave this week, but we are delighted to have with us today Reverend Carin Bonifacino. Her topic will be an incredibly important one for all of us. What's old is new, engaging in ritual around the death of someone you love. I especially want to welcome any visitors to our online service this morning. We hope we'll get the chance to get to know you. You can say hello in the comments or go to ucwc.org or send us an email if you'd like more information about our congregation or would like to be in touch with us directly. We also hope you'll join us for the online social hour. The link and the password are in connections. We'll also put them in the comments for the service, and Eric will put them up on the screen at the end of the service. Unitarian Universalism holds that great good comes from wide diversity. So whoever you are, whomever you love, and whatever your heritage, and from wherever your beliefs spring, we're pleased that you are here. Let us walk a while together. We have one important announcement, along with the other announcements that are in connections, and that is join the principal players for the premiere of The Tempest on UCWC's online YouTube channel. The play will begin at 7 p.m. on Saturday, August, I didn't write which August it is, I believe the 1st. Join us and chat with other views. We hope to see you there. It is next Saturday. As a reminder, please check connections and our online calendar for announcements and any other information of how to access our online events. And now the lighting of the chalice. Today's lighting is by S. William Feis. We light this flame. We light this flame as our fervent plea to brighten the dark corners of our hearts. We hold this flame, for in it is the promise of warmth for our souls grown cold in loss and despair. We kindle this light that we might continue to find comfort in its warmth, strength in its light, holiness in its presence. We follow this light that it might illuminate our search for purpose, for meaning, and for forgiveness. We light this chalice, knowing that even as this sacred spark of light is extinguished, in the ensuing darkness, its light will still burn bright with all the memory and hope of its all too brief flash across our lives. We light this flame of life, of love, of truth for the divine promise of healing hearts. And now, please join us as the Spirit Singers lead us in hymn number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Wonder, worship, lover of me. again, come, Spirit, come yet again, come yet again, come yet again, come.
And thank you to Miriam for working her magic and sharing with us that glorious song. And now please join me in the Unison Affirmation. We gather, aspiring to be a thriving, caring, and welcoming community that supports each person's spiritual journey, embraces diversity, challenges us to live responsibly, and is a catalyst for a just and compassionate world. We are very grateful for all the gifts our members keep on giving to support us. While we're online, you can donate on the web, by text, by app, or mail in a check. Or you can add something to whatever you pledge for each month. That would be greatly appreciated as we keep going through this time of shelter in place. Thank you for your generosity in every form. We will now receive our monthly offering as we listen to Debbie Carin play the native flute. That was beautiful. Thank you, Debbie. Our reading today is from Thich Nhat Hanh, titled Impermanence Makes Everything Possible. We are often sad and suffer a lot when things change, but change and impermanence have a positive side. Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. Life itself is possible. If a grain of corn is not impermanent, it can never be transformed into a stalk of corn. If the stalk was not impermanent, it could never provide us with the ear of corn we eat. If your daughter is not impermanent, she cannot grow up to become a woman. Then your grandchildren would never manifest. So instead of complaining about impermanence, we can say, warm welcome and long live impermanence. And now please enjoy some special music sung by Abby. The title is Sailing Away by Joyce holy.
You have built yourself a boat to sail upon life's rugged sea, and you filled it up with all your love of friends and family, and you fought the mighty current, and you drifted in the calm. But now the tide has changed your course, and you are sailing on, sailing on, sailing on. Through the ocean mist you're sailing on. May waves gently rock you while the wind sings your song, as you're sailing, sailing on. I will hear you in the music of the songs you love so well, in your gentle words of wisdom and the stories you would tell. I will see you in the pictures that are hanging on the wall, within the frame of memory. I'll feel your spirit call, sailing on, sailing on. Through the ocean mist you're sailing on. May waves gently rock you while the wind sings your song, as you're sailing, sailing on. If we know we're on a journey and we're all just passing through, if we know that life is more than what we see and what we do, if we know that time is fleeting but love is never gone, we know you live within our hearts, although you're sailing on, sailing on, sailing on. Through the ocean mist you're sailing on. May waves gently rock you while the wind sings your song, as you're sailing, sailing on, as you're sailing, sailing
Oh, Abby and Jason, what a wonderful way to lead us to our speaker today. I am delighted to share with you Reverend Carin.
Good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure to be with all of you here this morning. I'm going to begin this talk by jumping to the end of it, And I'm going to say that what I hope you will take away from my words here this morning is that ritual is important. And not only that, but ritual around the death of someone you love is really important. So now I'll go back to the beginning. I am an interfaith minister, and in the year and change since I've been ordained, I've had the opportunity to officiate quite a number of funerals and memorial services. In fact, the work that I do around death and dying is the primary reason why I followed the calling to become a minister. When I tell you that it is my deep honor to work with families to help them create meaningful services for their loved ones, I am not making that up. In my personal view, the funeral or memorial service is an essential piece of the grieving process and an important way in which we process loss. But it need not be the only piece or the only ritual that we have at our disposal. While I will talk about the funeral and memorial service here today, I will also talk about the opportunities for incorporating other kinds of rituals into those moments, those hours, and those days after death. While many of these ritual ideas may be new to you because they are not common in our culture, I assure you that in practice, they are as old as humanity itself. Now, before I proceed, I have to acknowledge the times that we are living in. The coronavirus has sadly forced the cancellation or postponement of thousands of funerals here in the United States. And it has prevented thousands more from being present with their loved ones as they were taking their last breaths. So while some of what I am describing here may not be possible, depending on what level of stay-at-home order we are living under, I hope that my talk will also be a nudge or a reminder that if you have had to postpone a funeral or memorial service, that you not do so for forever. So let's talk about what a ritual is, since that is the word that I use in this talk and in the title of my sermon. There are lots of definitions, but we can begin with the fact that the word ritual comes from an Indo-European root that means to fit together. And if you think about some of the rituals that are still practiced widely in our culture, you can see how that is the case. In a christening or baby naming, the new precious life that has come into being is ritually fit together with its religious or spiritual community and also with its extended family through the naming of godparents. In the ritual of a wedding ceremony, the couple is fit together in a new way, both legally and spiritually. And they are now woven in differently within their larger community who acknowledges that a transformation has taken place. And so it is with a funeral or memorial service. Angelise Arian says in her book, The Fourfold Way, ritual is recognizing a life change and doing something to honor and support the change. And the funeral or memorial service is the most common way we recognize death in our culture. It is the most common way that we honor the life of the person who has died. It is the most common way that we support those who are most affected by the loss. While the funeral and memorial service have changed and evolved over time, what is essential and important about them has not. Dr. Alan Wolfelt, one of the leading death educators and grief counselors in the United States, identifies how funerals and memorial services provide a platform, an outlet, and a means in which the bereaved can get their needs met at the time of a death. He identifies 6 very specific needs that are sometimes called the tasks of mourning, and which Dr. Wolfelt calls the reconciliation needs of mourning. And he has found that bereaved people who have these needs met are most often able to reconcile their grief and to go on to find continued meaning in life and living. So, what are those 6 needs or tasks of mourning? Number 1 is to acknowledge the reality of the death. Oftentimes, when I officiate a funeral, the people who were closest to the person who died will say to me, "Now it feels real." Up until that point, up until the day of the service, there was often a part of them that was still in denial or disbelief. The service helps them acknowledge the reality of the loss. At that moment, there can be no more denial about what has happened and what they are there to do. The second need of mourning is to move towards the pain of the loss. At a healthy funeral, there are tears and there is sadness. It is possible to celebrate a life and be sad that it is gone at the same time. I have seen many people cry while they are eulogizing their loved one, and I find that it is healthy, not just for them, but for everyone in the room. The funeral provides an outlet for grief and helps people to get in touch with their sorrow. The third need of mourning is to remember the person who has died. I don't know how many of you have ever attended a Quaker memorial service. It is composed entirely of the people who knew the person sharing stories and memories about that person's life. And in the case of someone who was extremely well known and well loved, the memorial service can go on for hours because everyone wants to speak and everyone wants to share something about who that person was and what that person meant to them. And so it is with more traditional services. The more that people speak about the person who died before, during, and after the service, I feel the more healing there is available to those who are deeply grieved, and the more comfort there is about the fact that this person will not be forgotten. The fourth need of mourning is to develop a new self-identity. We all have roles in life. Some of us are parents, some of us are brothers or sisters, and all of us are someone's child. When a death occurs, our roles in life shift. If we are a spouse, now we have become a widow or a widower. If we lose a parent, and especially when we have lost both of our parents, in many ways, we now become the elders in our families. A funeral or memorial service is an excellent way for our community to recognize that our station in life has changed in some fundamental way. The fifth need of mourning is the search for meaning. When someone dies, it is not uncommon for the bereaved to question all kinds of things related to the meaning of life and death. And that is as it should be. For it is in the exploration of these bigger questions that we can find reconciliation in our grief, a deeper understanding of our own mortality, and a reason for living going forward. As Dr. Wolfelt says, the funeral helps us in our search for meaning. It is the means in which we convey our beliefs and values about life and death. The sixth and final need or task of mourning is to receive ongoing support from others. At some funerals, I have heard people say, "It is the hugs and love that I am receiving that are getting me through this." And receiving support is an essential piece of mourning. The very act of service, the very act of having a service, is the act of asking people to come and support you. The presence of others helps us to know that we are not alone. As we are surrounded by our community, our family, our friends, in the best of cases, those bonds are strengthened, and we know who to turn to going forward when we need help. So those are the 6 needs of mourning, and those are the main reasons why the rituals of a funeral and memorial service are so important. And why, as I said, if you have been forced to put one off, try not to do so for forever. But I also alluded to the fact that there are other ways to engage in ritual around a death, besides what we know as our culturally accepted norms. And that is what I would like to talk about now. First of all, I would like to make a distinction between being a spectator at a ritual and actively participating in one yourself. Despite all the wonderful benefits to the grieving that I just described, at the end of the day, the participation of the family at a modern funeral is neither requested nor required. Beyond picking out some readings or giving a eulogy, or perhaps being a pallbearer, the job of the grieving is just to sit. By virtue of giving all our power away to priests, to funeral directors, to professionals of all kinds, we no longer touch the mystery of death as we once did. We no longer engage in acts of love and service to our dead as we once did. And we no longer process our grief through our bodies, through our arms and our hands as we once did. Instead, we relegate the grief to our heads and our hearts, and we leave the rest of our body out of the experience entirely. But I am here to tell you that what is old is new again, and that there are everyday people like you and like me who are rediscovering practices and rituals that have not been gone for quite so long. They are rediscovering practices that in many parts of the world have never been abandoned. They are rediscovering practices that say to the professionals in death care, this is my loved one, and this is my work to do. To begin with, one of the most powerful rituals that is available to each and every one of us is the washing of the body after death. If each and every one of us did only that after the deaths of our loved ones, I believe the gripping fear of death in this country would be cut in half in no time. Think about it. We take care of the things we love, right? We clean and paint our houses. We feed and clothe our children. We tend to our plants and our pets. Why is it that when a person dies, we no longer feel the impetus to care for them? Just moments before, we might have been wiping their brow or swabbing their lips or stroking their hair. But once the breath has left their body, we immediately hand them over to strangers. Well-meaning ones in many cases, but strangers nonetheless. What if, instead of picking up the phone right away and calling the funeral director, you asked the nurse at the hospital or the hospice to bring you some washcloths and soap and a bowl of water? And what if you took that washcloth and you just washed the face of your loved one? This person who perhaps you have held through illness, through injury, through suffering, is now at peace. Maybe seeing them washed and clean through the work of your own hands will bring you some peace. What if you took that washcloth and you washed their hands? What if you took that washcloth and you washed their feet? And maybe while you did that, you thanked your mother, your friend, your spouse, your child, for all the things they did for you in life with their hands, their face, their feet. It's a coming full circle moment that cannot be duplicated in the simple ritual of washing, something we all do every day. We express our respect, our love, and our gratitude towards our loved one. Rather than running away from the reality of the death, we turn towards it. We embrace it. We let this simple ritual be an expression of our love. And through our hands and our arms, we engage our bodies in the processing of our grief, and we give ourselves something to do. Imaginatively with your grief, and to send your loved one off wrapped in the well wishes and the love and prayers of their community. A final ritual that I will describe is the creation of an altar. It is something that anyone can do, and it can be done before the death or immediately after, or in the days and weeks that follow. All that is required is the intention to create a space in the home where your loved one is honored and remembered. You can place candles, photos, maybe some religious or spiritual objects if that seems appropriate, or perhaps items that belonged to the person or that remind you of them. The first altar that I ever built in my life was after the sudden and unexpected death of my dad 20 years ago. On a table in the foyer of my house, I placed some of my favorite pictures of him. I placed his carpenter's pencil and a mug that had the name of his mushroom farm on it. I found a variety of objects that either belonged to him or reminded me of him and of how much he loved nature and birds and his family. And each day, this table became a place for me to sit and cry and to remember him. He had been ripped out of our lives so suddenly, and the altar became a conduit of sorts, a way for me to channel my grief, to feel my love for him, to acknowledge his life and all that he had meant to me. So I offer these suggestions as other practices, other rituals that you may want to consider incorporating into your experience the next time you lose someone you love. When my husband died nearly 6 years ago, like my father, sadly, he was killed suddenly, and my children and I didn't have that peaceful deathbed experience where we could have taken washcloths and lovingly washed their father's body. But what I did do was to tell the funeral home that we were working with that I would get the casket. And with my brother-in-law by my side, I drove my husband's pickup truck to Lancaster and paid for a simple pine box from an Amish casket maker. This was something that I could do. And this became a meaningful ritual in which my brother-in-law and I picked the casket up from off the ground and loaded it into the truck ourselves. From there, we delivered it to the funeral home. And the next day, the casket with my husband's body was delivered to the church where a bucket of Sharpie markers for writing on it awaited everyone who came to the service. I wanted to have a funeral for my husband, Santiago. There was no question about that. My children and I needed all the healing, all the support, all the searching for meaning and remembering our loved one that the funeral ritual could provide. But I also knew that we did not have to be just spectators. And I also knew that by engaging with our bodies in whatever ways we could, we would be able to process our grief more completely, more fully. As I said at the beginning of this talk, these rituals that I describe here are as old as humanity itself. Obviously, I have not invented any of this. I offer these ideas and my story to you as a way to say that we have lost some of what makes us human by virtue of the fact that we engage so minimally with death in our modern culture. I offer these suggestions to you as a way to say that the transformational power of grief is still available to every single one of us if we have the courage to turn towards it and not run away from it. And lastly, I offer these suggestions and these ideas to you to say that the creation, the participation, and the implementation of ritual is important. And that when it comes to the death of someone you love, it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carin. That was really wonderful. And now it's time in our service for the cards of sharing and caring. I ask you to join us in singing There Is a Love Holding Us, and then Pam Sears will read the cards.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding me. I rest in this love.
Good morning. My name is Pam Sears. I'm a member of the pastoral care team and the contact person for July. We have several cards this morning. A candle is being lit for two who are being thought of today and who will be missed forever. A candle is being lit for one whose mother has died after suffering with Alzheimer's disease for 10 years. And for one who would like to give thanks to the pastoral care team for the phone calls she received earlier in the COVID shutdown. The thoughts conveyed in the messages fell into a soft spot in her spirit. And she asks for another candle to be lit to express her humble gratitude for the many reach outs she received this week from members of the congregation regarding the work she and her partners are engaged in around the COVID crisis in therapeutics development. She's feeling your encouragement and enthusiasm, and that was an unexpected honor. And this is why she's so glad she walked through the doors of this fellowship in mid-November of 2016. Remember, she says, how we all thought that was an apocalyptic event. And as always, a candle is lit for those joys and concerns that are unspoken, but that are in our hearts. Well, a little difficulty with this one. I'll hold this up.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. We rest in this love.
I now invite you to share in some moments of silence as we meditate together and all that we've heard resonates within us. May we all join together now as we sing hymn 331 as the Spirit singers guide us in life is the greatest gift of all.
Life is the greatest gift of all, the richest on this earth. Life and its creatures, great and small, of high and lowly birth. So treasure it and measure it with deeds of shining worth. Light is the greatest gift of all, its thought from iron hearts, its inspirations hidden plan, its quest surrounds all us. It brings the wind, it chains the storm, it weighs the outmost stars. We are of life, its shining gift, the measure of all things. Up from the dust our temples lift, our vision soars on wings. For seed and root, for flower and fruit, our grateful spirits sing.
Our closing words today are by Thich Nhat Hanh, Living Through Birth and Death. Whenever you scratch yourself, thousands of dead skin cells fall to the ground. When you walk on a path, you not only leave behind the skin cells of your body, you also leave behind your feelings, perceptions, and mental formations. Whether you spend an hour or a week, after you've gone, you leave behind many traces of yourself. The cells that you leave behind become grasses and wildflowers. Your continuation body is still there. It is in your children, in your grandchildren also. It is in every part of the world. When the flame of the candle reaches the end of the wick and goes out, it is still there. You cannot find it by looking in a linear direction. You have to find it by looking in a horizontal direction. And now we will listen to Jason playing the postlude, but please remember to join us online for our social chat. And always go in peace.